I wouldn't watch that show, the V series on the aliens, because it was called V.
Oh my gosh, I was just thinking about that.
No, and so when it came on TV, I totally freaked out because I was like,
I can see why.
They're controlling our reality from a multi-dimensional standpoint because those guys eat people. You know, they eat you energetically, they attach onto you. And then, you know, I started learning a lot about the reptilians, some of the darker reptilian races, which they, when they put their biosuit, you know, somewhere else on another planet, they can actually move through doorways as a being. And so most of the demonic activity that we see, we call it shadow people or demonic or, you know, entities, channel beings, you know, all these different things are these reptilians that are part of one of the factions that took over the planet 400,000 years ago.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If you run into such a negative force, I would just think that our listeners are like, holy crap, better said, holy shit. I would fucking pee my pants if I had that experience. What?
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
how do you, well, and that would be a very, from a social worker standpoint, a very normal physiological response. But how did you power through that? I mean, how did you, like, what did you have to convince yourself I'm okay? Did you have to negotiate? What did you do?
No, I just was like, I have work to do. I have to focus back on the work. You know,
oh my God.
We're going to be in serious trouble if this thing, you know, gets a stronger hold than it has.
That's, you know, what's interesting when you just said that, it made me think about the tutorials I got about being street smart when I lived and studied in graduate school in Philadelphia. And, you know, Abby Stum from South Philly said, you know, don't get eye contact with anybody. If anybody hackles you, you know, just, and sure enough, I was surrounded by a gang one night and they tried to kiss me and they're like, what's up? And they called me Susie and I go, my name is not Susie. And I just powered through with them. But it's almost like when you I guess I'm thinking out loud, but when you interact with something like that, you need to stay focused on, you can't succumb to that. You need to just stay focused on what your purposes are, which that night I was get home safely. But
yeah, and it was hard because, you know, my teacher at the time was, you know, we didn't get to talk about this. I didn't know if she was going to survive it until she, you know, came back months later. We started getting the telepathic messages and she started coming back in and you know, she ended up gaining enough strength to actually finish it off. But the thing that, you know, she told me back then was that beings who approach you in the lightest way, like look shimmery, talk to you, give you, you know, information, you know, seem like, you know, they're out of this world kind of a thing. She said those are like the darkest and most negative beings. And so you think about, you know, so I think about things like, you know, Mothman sightings, and the Mothman is always showing up, and it terrifies people, but not one person has ever said the Mothman ever has harmed them. You know,
right.
my mom had, when she was dying, basically had the Mothman show up in her room. And I think that it was, you know, for better terms, like the Grim Reaper, basically notifying her that, you know, her time was short.
Right.
And I had family members at that time that were evangelical that said, oh, well, no wonder she's sick and she's, you know, cohorting with the devil and all this other stuff. But, you know, knowing now from what I know from my medicine work and my shamanism work is that those beings are showing you exactly who they are, and they're terrifying to us.
Right.
And the other ones that show up as nice and want to give you information are all shimmery and, oh, you know, all this other
I've
stuff.
always said, would you rather be dealing with a wolf in sheep's clothing or a sheep in wolf's clothing? I'll take the sheep in wolf's clothing.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, with a lot of the channeling stuff. So back to this woman, Kane, and I want to call her Sandy Kane, not Candy Kane. Her
I'll try
last
to
name
Google
is
it
Kane.
and pull it up. Okay.
Kane. And I don't think she's been doing things for a long time, but what happened was she was one of the first paranormal people. And she was one of the first people that started, and this might be going back to whenever the first, not EMF readers came out, but when the first voice activated spirit communicator came forth, where they could get people talking or messages, on them from going to houses and dealing with people at paranormal activity. But what happened to her was that she was recording all these records from this, behind closed doors spirit thing, and they were telling, people like amazing things on these recordings that, there's ascension and there's this and oh yeah, this, that, and the other thing. Well, one day she accidentally played it in reverse. And what it really said was, these stupid damn humans, they'll believe anything. And it just went on and on and on, and it talked in the back. So she started taking all these recordings that she'd saved from these multi-dimensional beings that they were communicating with and started playing them all in reverse. And the truth about what they were saying showed up, that, they just love to rape humans and eat them, and they're so stupid. And then she started learning that, then she started learning that some of the people that had died through the heaven experience had been taken over to the other side, but the other side was in prison captivity of these reptilians. So
Does she have really long hair?
No, she did have really long hair when she first started doing it. Now, I think she's out of the scene, but the last video she did, she cut all of her hair off, but it was pretty much gray, long gray hair. And so she was the first person that kind of collaborated what I had seen 27 years ago when we started removing a lot of these beings out of people's energy fields and what they really were. So ever since then, like even with my star family, when they, took me up and they told me, about that they gave me the brain cancer, they had to give me the head injuries to slow me down because they were afraid that I was going to get murdered on this planet and I wouldn't be able to, collect all the information and data from all the different experiences and information. And, so that I hadn't fallen from grace. It's just they had to block communication with them. And, for a period of time, because I thought I'd fallen from grace. I thought I had done something wrong, that they don't want to interact or communicate with me anymore. So I felt like I had lost some of my abilities after the brain cancer, and I didn't know why I was being cursed, and they told me that I wasn't. But then after about 6 months of thinking about that, I got really pissed off, and I started yelling at them, and I was like, no contact, stay the fuck away from me, because you people are the ones that are supposed to love me more than anybody, and you have harmed me by, creating these scenarios where I have major head injuries and that I had brain cancer, one of the most horrible things I've ever had to endure, and no help and support in order, to endure how unbelievably horrific having brain cancer is. So, after that, it was really kind of in 2014, I really kind of started saying, I have my own mind and other people have their own mind. And you can build critical thinking. You can use your right and left hemisphere. You can sort things out in this world. And then you still have all these people who dabble with a lot of this stuff, And if they get in too deep, they're not going to be able to get out. And sometimes they don't get out unscathed. Like Ryan, my student. He's not my student anymore, but he had to go back and learn a whole bunch of, ancient arts in order to manage, his thing that he brought back from doing ayahuasca.
Can I ask you a question? When I Googled Sandy Kane, because I think I've actually seen her.
Yeah.
She does she have a history of being? Was she a stripper? Is she?
No, I don't think she. I don't know. I mean, she was pretty old.
Right. That's exactly who I saw. So is she also known as the Naked Cowgirl? Because I saw her in Times Square.
No, I don't think so. Because in the 80s, she was like 65. And her websites have been taken down and all that other stuff. I mean, she presented her information and, Peggy Kane.
Peggy Kane. Okay, sorry to divert. I'm so sorry.
And so there's some stuff, I just looked her up, but there's some stuff that's on here. But the other thing, too, is like I think some of the last stuff is fairly old that she talks about. And the last videos she actually put out, she thought that there was going to be, some kind of change that was going to happen on the planet, and that there might be some good ETs that, were coming in and going to try to help out. But it's going to be a long time before a lot of that stuff happens.
Right.
Because, they're just getting started. And the other thing, too, is like we have free will. So you have like the really dark extraterrestrials and multidimensional beings that have a pretty strong foothold here. And then you have the ones that are kind of in the middle that you want to maybe fight with the negative energies and battle them, and that kind of stuff's going on. And then you have the super higher evolved ones that don't want to really get involved because, if their opinion is if we haven't consciously evolved far enough, then why would they extract us? If we need to learn how to extract ourselves. And a lot of them look at it this way. We've all been involved with destroying a whole planet.
Right. Oh, I
know. Our
family
family lines have destroyed a planet. So do you really think that they want to take us anywhere?
That's a really good point.
They don't want to take us to another planet. And so I just tell people, use your mind. I mean, I always loved Sesame Street when I was a kid because it had, the best thing ever. It had that whole thing that said, I'm a terrible singer, but it basically said, which one of these things doesn't go together? Which one of these things doesn't belong, right? And so we were taught that when we were first watching Sesame Street, to use your mind, right? What doesn't belong? What kind of information doesn't belong? And, I'm not trying to harsh out on New Agers or the whole Ascension people.
I get it.
The natives are setting up right now, the ones that are, coming back to the medicine work, they're setting up right now for the planet to be shaken down really hard. They call it the fifth extinction. And so that they can actually get back to work and start fixing it after, fixing the energetics of it. I mean, the seeds, we got just a few minutes left, but let me just tell you about the seeds, okay?
Okay. So, but make sure that people who are listening that are intrigued by all of the wealth of information you provide, they probably want to know how to find you, so make sure that you include that at some point, okay?
Yeah. So I'll just tell you my YouTube channel is Consciousness of Economics and Urban Farm Project. And then I'm on Facebook, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, and then I contribute on a lot of other people's websites. And I have on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, I have a weekly radio show in Studio A at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time called Carrying Stones and Digging Holes on Revolution Radio. So it's a pretty good show. I have all kinds of really cool people on. This week I have a guy from Seeds of Independence Preservation, which is people, bringing back some of the ancient seeds and doing outgrows of them to replace them so that we have food sovereignty, kind of a thing. They're not owned. So we'll talk just about the seeds, because this just on a physical level, this will blow people's lids off, blew my lid off. So, so I started working with this guy named Greg Schoen. And if you go to my YouTube channel, there are, I've done 2 shows with him. I think he's coming back on, but he in the 70s was a horticulturist, white, and he ended up working with a guy, I think, named White Eagle, who's a native man who I believe the story is that he didn't have anyone to pass on these heirloom seeds, or they call them heritage seeds. I call them, sacred seeds, because they're the oldest seeds on the planet. I mean, they found squashes in caves, right, that are 500 years old, decayed, and the seeds still work. They can plant the seeds and they still work. That's kind of unheard of, because most seeds will only last like 2 to 4 years, right?
Wow.
And a good thing. So anyway, so he started studying with this guy, and this guy passed down the native seeds and told him the stories and took him to places and taught him, took him through the ceremonies and, all this other stuff. Well, right now, Greg still does large outgrows of native seeds, and he finds seeds where there's like 50 of them or whatever, and he will, grow them and do huge outgrows, and then he starts returning them back to those people, because these were the currencies, these are the medicine, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual medicine for all beings on earth. They were used in trade. They were the currency. Each family had their own, types of varieties. So they would intermarry into families, so that they could cultivate, seeds and medicines together. And we'll just talk about the corn. So there's petroglyphs that depict, especially with the Hopis. I think the Navajo may have some. I don't know. And they're hard to get to. You can't go unless you're invited to go to look at this stuff, right? Because it's kept secret from the public, because it would be misused and misrepresented. And white people have a tendency to take information and act like it's their information, and then they don't know the proper way, right? They don't know they don't understand the ceremonies or the proper way, and then they act like they know all this stuff, and then they really cause a lot of damage to native culture. Because they don't really understand, they don't really get it, and they use it kind of as a power trip. So, so there's petroglyphs of the ETs coming from in their ships, coming to Earth, and handing corn to the native people, right? So it came from somewhere else, the native seeds, right? So the natives have been hiding because of all the things that have happened to them, especially in North America. They've been hiding a lot of these seeds, and some of the information has been lost because, they've been destroyed, or the family line was killed, or, the people that held on to the seed medicines in the tribe and different things, or they were just completely sold out, right, and stopped from ever growing them, and so there's just a lot of contact that was lost. But there are still a lot of people. So Greg is the manager of the seed bank, the native seed bank of the 13th indigenous grandmother. And the 13th indigenous grandmothers united worldwide to heal the planet.
Wow.
So he's, doing these outgrows of these seeds that are special, and getting them into these seed banks to get them distributed, to the native people and to whoever wants to. And so I'm really hoping that this next spring I'll have land where I can start doing large outgrows.
Can I ask,
helping Greg?
Is there any coincidence between the 13th indigenous grandmother and the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati? I mean, it just, I don't know. That was the automatic thought that came in my head. That's why I said, wow.
I'm sure that it's like, I'm sure that there has something energetically to do, but I think it was just the 13 grandmothers came together just as a collective, and maybe it's to help, battle the Illuminati. I don't really know. But 13 has always been like a really, powerful number in lots of ways. It's considered kind of like the dimensional doorway number, right? That's why in hotels they don't have a 13th floor.
Right.
They try to avoid using, 13th Street, or anything like that, because they don't want to be activating things, right, in our reality.
Exactly.
So anyway, just get this out. So anyway, so Greg says, well, I'm going to send you a seed package, right? So that you can explore some of these seeds, because I had a small garden where I could grow a few of them and just kind of check them out. And mostly what I grew was native Tulsi or holy basil from India. I got this killer, unbelievable, amazing plant. It was called a popping sorghum, which is a native plant from India. And then I grew, I think, a Hopi corn, and I grew Hopi sunflower seeds and something else too. I don't know. Anyway, so I only had a small area. So he sent me the seed packages. So one of the last things he said on the show was that they were talking about how these ancient corn, that came from the stars has actually codes in it. There's actually codes, like the same kind of codes that you would create on a computer, to create something, new software, a website, you activate and make these codes and create a virtual reality. Well, these corn have the same thing. These native plants have the same thing. And some of the corn, how they could tell which corn belonged to what tribe, was you could take the corn seed out once it was dried, and you could look at the side of it, and it would literally have bars and lines in it, right? It would have a code on the side of it.
Wow.
Right? And so what happened was some native people actually tattooed those codes on their chin.
Ah.
Right? They called it chin corn.
Is this equivalent to like the do not resuscitate tattoo?
Yeah. But what it showed was the code of the food, of their currency, their food, the energetic, matrix of that corn, right?
That makes sense.
So can you imagine ingesting something that has those kinds of codes in it? You wouldn't need health care. We're ingesting stuff that the seeds have replacement codes of death, killing our RNA and DNA like Monsanto's, right? So when the corn seeds came to me, and also too, they have a multi-dimensional aspect to the seeds, right? Because their activation of codes of virtual reality, holographic, multi-dimensional worlds and experiences and access to those worlds. And so you do the ceremonies have helped to activate those codes. So sometimes when you get to go meet a new corn or a type of, you have to meet with the native people who can give you the permission to interact with that corn, right? And give you the ceremonies and the songs and the drum beats and how to interact with that corn, right? So that the corn becomes energetically in a relationship with you. So what happened was that Greg put all these seeds in the mail, and then 2 nights later, I had forgotten that the seeds were coming, and I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I could hear native people singing, and I mean loud. They were like, "Ay-ah, ay-ah." They were like men and women, and they were like busting a move, and I was like, holy cow. I was like, wow, what the hell is going on? So I'd called a friend of mine, and I said, hey, a native friend of mine, and I said, hey, I just heard this crazy ass native singing last night. What are we dealing with right now? And she goes, well, aren't you getting those native seeds in the mail? And I said, oh yeah. She goes, well, usually they come, with the ancestors are going to pray them into activation to you, which means that the seeds now and the ancestors are collecting you to work with the seeds and activating all of it, so that you can actually work with them and plant them and do all this other stuff with them. And it sounds like to me they're bringing you into the loop. And that's when I realized I'm probably going to end up growing outgrowths of these seeds, because they're the ones that are the ancestors that have passed forward, including the extraterrestrials that brought them here. When Native people talk about the ancestors, they always look at the sky, the star nations, that they originated from, right?
That makes sense.
So anyway, so for me, those are the kind of, multi-dimensional things that I like to dabble with in the here and now, which is the earth and natural law and the law of the planet and becoming friends with trees and becoming the friends with the corn and becoming friends with the soil and becoming friends with, you know, the world that's around me and interacting on a multidimensional plane with that.
You know what strikes me is as I listen to this, I almost think time travel is like really simplified compared to the level of intelligence that's out there. Even though we've been focusing on it.
We just have to use our mind. And, you know, if you look at a lot of some of the shamanism work that was put out, like just say Carlo Castaneda, and what Don Juan says all the time, you know, to like Carlo Castaneda, one of the reasons that a lot of these ancient shaman lines pick people who've gone to college is because they have learned how to use their right and left hemisphere, right? Oh. And so they can critically think, where the mass population can't critically think. And in order for you to, I don't even know, I guess.
Question the answers.
Well, defeat this reality on some level, or bypass it, or, you know, you have to be able to critically think, because you have to be able to, you know, you have to use both sides of your hemisphere, because you're a duality being. You've got your left hemisphere and your right hemisphere, and if you take them apart in a dead body, they're not connected. So you actually have two different factions in yourself that are operating. One deals with the past and the future, which is the right hemisphere, or the left hemisphere, which is reptilian. It deals with language, it deals with details, it deals with me as an identity, it deals with paying bills, education, ego. It's cold and calculated, manipulative. It's where disease comes from, because it runs a low brainwave pattern, and acid.
Eat your heart out, Sigmund Freud.
And then you've got your right hemisphere that is, you know, the present moment, where spontaneous would happen, where, if people want to call it the divinity or the access to God, if that's what you really want to call it. And so and then, you know, the left hemisphere operates the right side of the body. And then the right, just think about in American culture, nobody's right hemisphere is working. And just because you're right or left-handed doesn't make you operating in your right hemisphere. Let's just get that straight right now. So in order to be really human, we have to learn how to develop both sides of the brain, which means that both sides of the body are actually regenerating. Because if your left brain is shut down from trauma and stress and competitiveness and the, you know, education system, the religious system, how we're brought up and trained, then you can see why so many people have heart disease, because the right brain part of you is dealing with the left side of your body, and so your heart is not being regenerated because your right hemisphere is not really operating.
Wow,
and that just blew my mind. So we're dualistic beings. We have two sides, and we either are running the reptilian, you know, code, which is the left hemisphere in America and the UK, which were developed into us by age 5, you know, and we're lateralized in the left hemisphere, you know, or we're running like the native people. Most of them run, you know, the right brain codes. This is why they've tried to kill them. They've tried to, because they operate in such a, you know, right hemisphere, present moment place of existence, you know, like united with the Creator, because the Creator's in them.
And just so people know that Bridgette is a healing practitioner, and I myself see her, and I definitely am feeling benefits from consulting you with my own cardiac health. So I just want to throw all that out there.
Yeah, so the thing is like we have to, so I believe, you know, in order for us to be human and be activated on a human, we'll call it a human scale, we have to learn how to operate in our right and left hemisphere. And you can really see people who are left hemisphere, you know, lateralized, is because they'll have one eye that's lower or one eye that's open more than the other. I see this a lot with the reporters that are talking about the Kavanaugh stuff, because all the reporters are like out of their minds. That's what I call it. They've got one eye, one side of their face is slumped down, one of their eye on one side is way larger, because when you're really lateralized in your left hemisphere, it looks like you've had a stroke.
Yeah.
Because that part of your brain is like overdeveloped, and it's overdeveloping the structure of your face, actually. So it's interesting, to see. And if you see people that have what's called in Chinese medicine, real quick, it's called haraku, I think, or something like that. But it's where they call it three sides white, where there's white all the way around your eye, and your eyelids are not connecting to the colored part of your eye. And those are people who are seriously left hemisphere lateralized and this is the other thing too, is if you're operating in the left hemisphere, you're lateralized in the hemisphere, you will never heal. You will never live long. There are so many things that you will never do because your right part of your brain that brings you into the present moment doesn't exist. So you're in a loop of past, future, and you keep creating the same experiences over and over and over again. And they may have different phases and events. Yeah.
I just thought you definitely will find, well, this isn't going to surprise you, but for listeners, I am a big, how do you spell it? So I Googled the three eyes. What is it? Three white eyes? And
three sides white.
Okay. And so Wikipedia entry has the picture associated with Wikipedia entry is JFK. And I'm literally pulling this up as you're saying they don't live, I don't remember your exact words, but they don't live long or they live premature lives. And so I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so they call it Sanpaku.
S-A-N. Yes, Sanpaku. For us, Anglican folks. S-A-N, San, Pa, P-A.
Yeah, and the other thing too is we just got a quick minute, but if you walked into a traditional Asian practitioner, doctor, and they saw your eyes like that, they would just be like, holy cow, you're serious. You need serious medical attention.
Wow.
Because you're just so far out of your mind, and your body, is everything's just, crazy. So
shit, I need to go look in the mirror.